Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining our webinar, the second in the series of four. And today we're going to be talking about pitching yourself at the right level. We're delighted to be joined today by two fantastic speakers, Belinda Whittingham and James Murphy. And without further ado, I'm going to ask them both to introduce themselves. Belinda, lovely to have you with us today.
Good afternoon, everybody. Thanks for taking the time to connect with us this afternoon. My name is Belinda. Everyone affectionately calls me Belle, and I am one of the lead talent recruitment managers at PwC. My background is in technology recruitment. I have over 15 years of experience in that space. I'm joining this call from Johannesburg in South Africa today. And the reason for that is I'm currently on secondment from the UK firm on a 12-week secondment, and it is to accelerate the growth of the technology and investment centre that we are establishing as a new global capability out of Johannesburg and Cape Town, which is super exciting. Great to be here. I'll pass over to James.
Thanks. Look, always enjoy doing these talks, and thanks for having me, Lisa. So I served for 19 years in the military. I left and moved into cybersecurity. I did that for 14 months and used tech vets to do so. And then, as a really nice sort of turn of fate, I ended up running tech vets and have led that program for the last 4 or 5 years. Most recently, I've taken on a new role at the Forced Employment Charity as the Director of Veterans and Families. So my job is to look after all of our programs that support veterans, families, but also the Tech Vets program as well. And obviously, my experience coming from a military background is that I've been through the process in the last 6, 7 years, and I've seen thousands of others go through that process.
Fantastic. Thank you both very much. By way of introduction, I also am an Army veteran. And when I left, I went and worked in financial services for 2 investment banks. And I've been working in the Forces Employment Charity, well, in this space for about 10 years now, rather shockingly. And my role is that of a career consultant. So I help people work out perhaps what they want to do after military life, or even beyond that throughout their careers. So if we could go to the first slide, please, Lina. So a little bit of housekeeping for you. Today's webinar should last about 30 minutes. The idea is that it's a lunchtime slot, so not taking over your day, fitting nicely into perhaps enjoying a sandwich as you listen to us. But please do interact with us throughout the webinar if you can. We're delighted to receive your questions, and we'll try and answer them as much as we can if time permits. Ideally, we'll have a slot at the end to do that, but as the webinar progresses, if a question is particularly pertinent to what the speakers are talking about, I'll try and introduce it as we go along. The webinar is being recorded and will be made available on our website. So if you have friends, colleagues, anyone that you know who has sadly missed out today, please do spread the word that in due course they will be able to access not only this webinar, but the whole series on our website, as I said. At the end, I will also kind of just run through what the next 2 webinars are going to be, so that you have a good idea of how we can further support you in this series. So the next slide, please. Just to quickly summarise the 3 main themes that we're going to cover off on today. We're going to be talking about what is your worth, how to perhaps understand what that means, understanding as well your brand and why this is important, and of course the very important topic of networking and how valuable this is going to be to you, not only in your job search, but throughout your career. So without further ado, let's move to the first slide. James, would you like to talk through these kind of topics here?
Yeah, of course. So we'll kick it off with translation of skills, and I'll run through some stuff. We'll have a chat through soft skills and how to best get those across. There's a really interesting topic that Belinda and I discussed around loyalty. And that'll be quite an interesting one to cover. And then Belinda's really gonna add her experience on the salary side of stuff. But yeah, so if we can kick into the next slide, brilliant, thank you. So everyone always talks a lot about soft skills and translation of skills, and it's always a challenge when you're in the military and it uses a different language, a different set of names, terminologies, etc., for the various skills, job roles, and the like. McKinsey and Company came out with a really good article that looked at the future workforce and the sort of key skills within that workforce, what would be fundamental for that future workforce. And they boiled that down to 56 skills across 4 different areas: cognitive, interpersonal, self-leadership, and then sort of digital and software. But what I found quite interesting was when I went through those list of skills, and I put some of the key ones that I think are the main priority ones to showcase for the forces community, is there were about 75% of them I could tick off, with a common sort of set of skills. But what articles like that does to aid individuals when they're looking to translate their skills is when you read the detail, you can start seeing exactly where your skills are best fit, and the language that is used in the article is the language that you would use for a business in a business term. And you know, generally these are around, you know, your sort of cognitive, your interpersonal self leadership, as I suggested. And when people leave, you get this common theme that everyone's a great leader, everyone's a great communicator, and it's all a bit lofty and a bit throwaway, and everyone has the same executive summary on their CV. So I think, I mean, look, personally, I mean, I like to dig down and have stuff that's a bit more tangible. And rather than leadership, because not everyone has had great experience in the military leading, self-leadership is a really good one. The ability to hit targets, you know, that goals achievement side of things. I know, Belinda, you and I discussed that, and the value of having that sort of adaptability, that mental resilience, that target-driven mindset, and the ability to get stuff done. I mean, I think, you know, that, as well as the sort of building relationships, the communication skills within that, the interpersonal skills, the sociability, and the problem solving, I think are probably the main ones. I mean, what's your thoughts?
Thank you, James. Everyone, as you can see, James and I have storyboarded this as like the blockbusters, which for those of you who grew up in the 80s and 90s, you can see some of the highlights. Now, for me as a recruiter, no, I hire up to partner level here at PwC. For me, it's about building that narrative. So picking up on what James is saying here, if you say to me, oh, I want a role that, you know, where there's growth, well, in what way? Tell me more. So all of these things are interconnected. And I think that ability to be able to actually evidence how you have built team effectiveness, for example, and how you've developed relationships is really important. The goal setting and in Civvy Street is fundamentally different to what you've experienced in the military. Your goal setting automatically translates, and correct me if I'm wrong here, James, automatically translates to whether or not you're going to get promoted. In the civilian world, that's not how it works. So, you know, let me go into more detail on that. If we take a company like PwC, we have, when I'm measured on my performance, there are specific KPIs that I need to adhere to on a quarterly basis, but there are also, you know, the company values as well. And I need to be able to evidence how I am living and breathing those company values at all times. But equally how I'm growing myself and the people around me. James, anything else you want to add on that? Is that helpful just in terms of how it works a bit more on the civilian side?
No, I think that's perfect, and I think the key point there was the KPIs, those metrics that are used to measure performance, whether that's, you know, as a team, as an individual, as a program, whatever that may be. There is another benefit to that, and actually, many people can get a pay rise and a bonus if they are able to showcase how they're achieving their goals, and it does become a very individual thing. And if you can, I suppose the other thing with the goals achievement side of it is, whilst there'll be some stuff that's set, your ability to drive forward and set your own goals for yourself to push beyond the sort of benchmark barriers will stand people out ahead of the crowd. But I think generally, I think that covers most of it. I mean, it's a good start for 10, and I think we'll move on. If there's any questions, we can come back to this. But yeah, next slide, please. I'll hand over to you on this one, Belinda.
This is my one. So look, James and I are having a really interesting discussion over the last couple of weeks just around how do we ensure that, you know, people who are engaging with FEC, or, you know, you're in your career transition journey at the moment, to understand where on earth you pitch yourself in salary. So this is how it's landed with me, because that's my day job, is negotiating people's salaries, in addition to many other things. So I think key thing for me is this: research, number one. So you're going to be, or you might already be, thinking about the types of companies that you want to be working for. Slice that by industry, and I really recommend, you know, using LinkedIn on that basis, and you will see roles advertised. You'll see roles advertised on job boards as well, and that will start to give you a bit of an indicator. But to go down into the more granular detail, there are lots of data sources that you can draw upon. Now, Glassdoor, if you haven't heard of it, is a review website, a bit like TripAdvisor, but for companies. If you haven't heard of it, you should definitely sign up to it. Again, this will help you to understand, if you're seeing a role advertised, you can go on there as a bit of a reference point to see roughly whether or not that salary is kind of in the bracket that you think it might be applicable to yourself. In terms of kind of getting an understanding of company culture, I think that, you know, you can sign up to company newsletters. Their LinkedIn pages are pretty informative. You know, there'll be quite regular comms for larger organizations. And I think that, you know, from a salary standpoint, in terms of kind of negotiations, if you're working with a recruitment agent, I would be very upfront with what your break point is. So your break point is like your minimum, your minimum viable product, like your total remuneration. One of the things that James highlighted to me, and I think it's very important to bring up on this discussion today, is around the total comp. So the way that your remuneration works within the armed forces is very different to Civvy Street. And for example, you don't get bonuses, to my knowledge, but you do get allowances in different ways, but those can start and stop depending upon what you're up to. Now, this is the key thing within the civilian world. I would say that, you know, what's going to be fundamentally different, probably pension contributions in a big way. And I would also say that a lot of companies do have a bonus structure, but again, you need to understand, if you're interviewing with a company, you need to understand what that bonus cycle actually looks like, so the performance cycle, and at what point of their financial year are you joining. So does that mean you are entitled to the full cycle, or is it going to be prorated? And these are absolutely questions that you are totally, and I fully expect somebody to be asking me where they're going to land in that regard, because that's pretty important when you're considering your total remuneration. In terms of, you know, I've got a few kind of pointers up here in terms of personal growth, loyalty, the trust and the credibility. It's very difficult for me when obviously I get asked to mentor quite a few ex-military personnel, because I didn't say it on my intro, but no, I'm a RAF brat. I've never served in the military, but all my family have. So I've got the whole shebang. So RAF, Navy, and Air Force. Sorry to any Marines who are on the call. So Marines as well, but not in my family, direct family. And I would say that, you know, in terms of people coming out of the military, regardless of what the level is, I think there's a particular perception of what your market worth is. But that's why I started this with saying specifically, you must do your research on the specific company that you're looking to apply to, because number one, you don't want to waste anyone's time, least of all your own, because you're trying to find the job. And number two, you want to ensure that, you know, you've got the right growth trajectory as well. So again, ask those questions. How often is pay reviewed? How many, ask the question, how many people did you promote in the last year? So I think that hopefully those are a couple of pointers. We can come back to this as well. I'm conscious of time. So hopefully those are some useful snippets of considerations of how you yourself can be prepared on those salary negotiation fronts.
I agree. And I think research of all the things tied in with networking is going to be the thing that brings that to life and really gives you that understanding. And then the more networking you do, especially the more veterans you speak to, because they'll reach out and help you as long as you reach out to them. I think you get that understanding. You've got to go and visit these companies to get an understanding of their culture as well. Yeah, brilliant.
Yeah, I particularly liked it, Belinda, when you said, when someone says, oh, I'm looking for growth in my next role, you know, what do people actually mean by that? So you can't just trot out platitudes. You've got to think, what do I really want? And the more you can articulate that, the more it looks like you've invested your time and effort into research.
Absolutely. I think that for me as a recruiter, and I can tell you when I'm chairing interviews with partners and directors and senior managers here at PwC, you know, that's kind of a textbook answer. They don't want a textbook answer. So what they're more interested in is that flexible mindset, which I know we're going to talk about a bit more, James, but also that continuous, that hunger for continuous learning, because no one is the finished article.
100%. Do we want to quickly touch on loyalty? I think it's worth just saying that it is a distinct. We don't need to spend too long on this, but leaving the military, you've been in an institution where actually everything is all about the military, or certainly the service that you're in, the cap badge that you're in. When you leave, actually, it's more about you as the individual, and you're never tied to an organization. In fact, actually, people are more actively encouraged to move because you gain more experience, more breadth and depth of experience in doing so. And I think it's probably worth mentioning that don't get worried about when you leave. You get your first job, you leave within the sort of 2 years sort of period. That may happen. The only thing on the flip side of that, you just got to be careful that what you don't want to do is become this person that's hopping jobs every year, because that looks like you can't stick with something, and there's going to be less assurance for a hiring manager. But the loyalty is all about you, all about your career development, your growth, what you want to get out of it, your work-life balance, etc.
And James, I think that's a really good point about the work-life balance. There might be people on this call who are thinking, well, do I actually want to work full-time? And you might actually prefer a compressed hours, or deciding that that the first job you land in out of the military is not a dream job. And I'll be frank, the job market is tough right now, so that might be the case. But I think that you shouldn't feel obliged to carry on if it's not giving you the things that are your goals and priorities. I think that's what James and I are both kind of trying to emphasize here.
Exactly. And I think if you find that if you're working in the industry that you enjoy, in a company that you'd like to be part of, in a team that you feel that you belong in, and you're delivering impact on the work that you're doing, I think at that stage you'll be less fussed about what the job title is, and arguably less fussed about what the salary is, because you're
Lisa, I know that we need to move on to our next slide, but just one final point on that, and is that and I think this is more familiar for military people and spouses, of course, is just around internal mobility. The larger the corporate, the bigger the internal mobility programs. And again, that's something to be really cognizant of when you are thinking about the type of company that you might land into, because internal mobility is incredible in an organization like PwC. Look at me, ended up out in Johannesburg. Who'd have thought it?
Yeah, so I mean, so you're talking literally about your ability to move laterally across the organisation into different parts of the organisation, different departments, different parts of the world. Exactly. Yeah, really good point. Fantastic.
I think organisations would rather keep talent than lose them. So, absolutely.
It's a lot cheaper. A lot more costly to keep recruiting when you can retain that talent.
It certainly is.
If we can, sorry, move to the next slide. Yeah. So this word brand, I think a lot of military people feel a bit uncomfortable with talking about their own brand. So can you perhaps shed some light on this and how, how people can try to feel a bit less uncomfortable about it?
Yeah, please.
That was it.
Slide, please. So I suppose I'll let you
James,
kick off with this in a sec. I'll let you kick off in a sec with this, Belinda. Sorry, but I think first and foremost, it's probably worth making sure people understand that this isn't about acting out. It's not about putting on a show. It's literally about understanding who you are. And Belinda will talk you through this in a way that's far more user friendly than what you've probably heard in the past.
super. So look, for me as a recruiter, I really encourage you to build a narrative. So what I want to understand is if I'm interviewing somebody who's been in the military for 15 years, I want to hear about, think really carefully. What is it that you want me to know about you by the time I leave that room or this online webinar? That is the number one most important thing. So you can build that around case studies, for example, but you need to be evidence-based. And I cannot encourage everyone on this call enough to really take the time to think about what are the moments that you are most proud of? What are those situations that, might have been really difficult, that are relatable to somebody like me who's not military, but really demonstrate some of those skills that we were talking about earlier in our conversation. So the what is super important, signposting that, helping me with a perception of this person can be really effective in this role for these reasons. And then the positioning piece comes down to your role within the wider organization. So if you translate that into the military world, that is how you are interacting with other divisions. It might be other ministries, for example. You might have been on deployments where you are working with other territories, and how you have built those relationships. And then that accountability piece of sometimes things can go wrong. And what I really love to hear about, and the best interviews that I sit in, are the ones where an individual is able to give me a narrative around where something went wrong, how they dealt with it, and most importantly, what are the lessons learned that they're now applying going forward. That is highly powerful. It doesn't matter what grade I'm hiring for, you'd be amazed. I can sit on a partner panel for PwC, and there will be individuals who cannot articulate that. So that's why we really felt that personal brand was such an important topic for today, because being able to feel confident, and it will require practice, use your network, we're coming on to that. This makes an interview a conversation rather than a grilling. And it is far more enjoyable for everybody involved. And then just lastly, about the responsibility piece. Accountability and responsibility go hand in hand. But I think it is really important to signpost the level of responsibility you have held. And again, evidence it. If you've had budget responsibilities, tell me. If you have been handling really complex matrices, then tell me. If you've needed to, you've been perhaps not quite literally, but maybe for some people on this call, you've been parachuted in to deal with a particular situation and you've taken responsibility from somebody for a particular reason, tell me. These are really important things that allow somebody like myself, a hiring manager, a person in a more senior position in the company, to understand your ability to pivot, your flexible mindset, your agility. This all incorporates your personal brand. James, anything you'd like to add?
I don't think so. I think we'll move to the next one, the elevator pitch.
Brilliant.
Look, I think for me, the elevator pitch is incredibly important. People don't have a great deal of time. They are very busy. And if you can get in front of someone for a coffee, and like Belinda said, we'll come on to the networking, but if you can get in front of someone, you want to really make that impact right from the outset. And a really easy way of doing that, whether that's in person or even when you approach someone on a platform like LinkedIn, you've got to be concise and you've got to get your point across straight away. And these are the sort of points that Belinda will pick up on. But straight away, you've got to make sure it is tailored. Like a CV, just because you're going for an elevator pitch, you don't have the same one for every person. You do your research up front. You know exactly what's going to work. You know who they are, what role they're in, what department they work in, what projects they work on, what company they're part of, what industry they're in. And because of that, you can tailor that elevator pitch to appeal to that individual. Nice and punchy, and straight in there with your value proposition, exactly who you are, in a very concise way, what you're going to deliver, what your top skills are, or whatever your top deliverables are, in a really, really nice, concise way. And I think I'll hand over to you, Belinda, at that point.
Sure. I think that for me, the elevator pitch is probably the most dangerous area of an interview, because hiring managers, they might ask a really open question, tell me about yourself, but they're not looking for war and peace, right? If you are able to stick to this arrow in terms of format, you can get this down to like 1.5 minutes, 2 minutes tops, because they're not looking for your life story. Let's put it politely. And I can tell you, I have had to interrupt people who are giving me their life story, and it makes it more tricky. So I would say this is such an important area to focus on in terms of interview practice. If you have, with your career transition teams that you might be interacting with, this is the biggest area I recommend you practice. It's almost like getting up on the stage, and if that's not something you're comfortable with, you need to put yourself in that difficult situation. And even practice in front of the mirror. I've certainly mentored people who, I've got them to practice in front of the mirror, because if you can't stand the sound of your own voice, then it's pretty difficult to pitch yourself into an interview situation. The other thing I'd pick up on, which James and I touched upon when we were planning this webinar, was about tone, and how you can come across in your elevator pitch. And when I say tone, it's more around relatability. So please don't intimidate me or a hiring manager. They will not know about your world 9 times out of 10. So this is where your data points, building the narrative is really important. And that's why James has got here, tailoring to your audience, because those acronyms, you will need to tone those down, and ensure that somebody comes away, as I was saying on the previous slide, with those, what are the top 3 things that you want this person to know about you before they finish this interaction? Anything else you want to add on that point, James?
No, I think that's nail on the head, and a really nice sort of segue into the networking point. And I think that networking is really important. And I think my key point on this is that so many people, when they're leaving the military, haven't networked until, or they have, but they just don't realize it and they haven't formalized it. And then when they leave, it's all about getting a job. And networking is so much more than that. By networking, what you're doing is engaging with people across all sorts of areas of the business world. And you can start broad and narrow that down when you're looking for a job. But essentially what you need to do, it's all about knowledge gaining. So you want to be talking to people to learn more about their industries, their companies, their departments, their roles. There's no standardization in most industries. So rather than coming out and looking for a job title, you're going to want to know what sort of things people are working on, what sort of skills you want to use, what sort of responsibilities and accountabilities you want in a role, rather than looking for a specific job title, which can be very different in one company to the next. So networking will help you build that knowledge. What it will also do, you'll start off really rubbish at it, unless you're a really good natural networker, which is very rare. And over time, you'll build up to the point where with your elevator pitch improving the whole time, you'll get to a point where you're able to nail that straight away, and you're getting in these great conversations, getting beyond that first person in the organization. And once your network becomes 4 or 5 layers deep, then you're going to start getting the job opportunities come your way. Because in your first person network, everyone that you know is a first level connection. If they had a job for you, you'd already have it. So you've got to build these layers deeper. And one of the best ways to do that is attend events, but also hit LinkedIn. And LinkedIn is an absolute godsend. When I left, I chucked out 250 odd messages to people in the military, and I used the search bar, put in previous companies, RAF, Army, Navy, but also military defence, because some people are too important to put their service. And then you can look at a current company. So let's say you put in Google, that will bring up all the veterans from Google, and just hit one up who's in the sort of department you want to work in, and get your elevator pitch, and off you go. And every time you're networking, come away with 2, 3, 4 different people that individual can open up their connections for you, and then all of a sudden you start building. That'd be my key bit.
I think just picking up on the event side, I think it is quite nerve-wracking rocking up to big company events. I've volunteered with the FEC for a couple of years now, and I've been to your event that you hosted at JP Morgan, and then there was another event that PwC actually hosted, and that was a collaboration with our wonderful Big Four competitors. So and the attendance there was fantastic. What was fascinating for me, and something that I'll be really honest, I had not really appreciated, was that it was really nerve-wracking for people to actually just turn up. So I to James's point, I think you will gain more confidence as you go. And if I think about the JP Morgan event, I met this wonderful person who, they said they nearly didn't get on the train to come to the event because it was so nerve-wracking for them, and they were feeling really overwhelmed about the fact that they were leaving the military after 17 years. And I turned around and I said, but look, you're here. This is amazing. Like you are halfway there, and there are all these companies here, and we're here because we want to talk to you. So I think that's a really important point to take away from this section, is that, if PwC have rocked up to an event, like, we want to speak to you and we want to engage with you. So to James's point, think about what is it that you can take away from that interaction, and ask us questions, sign up to our newsletters, check out our careers website afterwards, follow us on LinkedIn, and the preparation thing, absolutely. You want to ensure that if there are specific companies that are like high on maybe in your top 5 or top 10 companies that you could see yourself working for, see if you can connect with some of those people in advance. You might not guess correctly that they're there, but you could say, I'm attending this event and I noticed that your company's going to be there. It would be great to speak to you if you're there. And they might actually just be able to say, well, actually, I'm not there, but my colleague is. Let me introduce you to them. And so these softer interactions happen from that, that type of proactivity.
Yeah, agreed. And it helps with your confidence as well. But the prep, I think, is the follow-up is obviously essential, but the prep, I mean, crikey, the amount of times I've been to an event before I go, especially if it's one of the big employer events, like the CTP events, you've got loads and loads of employers there. You get there and it's just overwhelming. If you do start with that idea, that mindset, that if you come away having spoken to just the top 5 in your list, then you've achieved something. But again, your elevator pitch, what do you want out from those companies? That's the other thing. Plan and prep what you want. Is it a conversation with someone in the department? Is it to apply for a role? Make sure you're very clear on what you want to get, and that way you can go in very, very focused, very targeted, and you'll make the most of your time.
And it's also, as the slide says there, about the follow-up. So, you know, if you don't have the time or it's too overwhelming to have a long conversation with somebody, as long as you get their contact details, you can follow up afterwards and say, excellent to meet you at the event today. You know, you were mobbed, so I didn't take up too much of your time. And then place your elevator pitch right there in an email and try and get a follow-up conversation. I mean, it's been enormously valuable today, guys, and I'm very sad to kind of be trying to call it to a close because we're running out of time. We did have one question around, can military people expect to earn more outside of the military than they do within? And I think, Belinda, you were going to take that one.
Let me take that one. Look, there was a reason that I opened my salary conversation with a skills-based focus. And it really, you know, salary correlates with the skills that you bring to the table for that particular organization. So the upfront answer is potentially, but it really comes down to that individual and what they bring to the table for that organization and how that benches, most importantly, and this is a very important point, how those skills bench with their existing workforce. Because every organization has a different grade structure, and that's something really important to appreciate outside of the military, that correlation, it doesn't translate. It doesn't translate.
And there's a difference as well in salary, depending on whether that company has, you know, it may have a headcount for someone to come in as a project manager, and then 6 months down the line, there may be a critical requirement for a project manager, in which case they're willing to pay more. You know, so I think timing is also included in that. But also it depends on what you want to do. You know, the whole point is that leading with salary is a dangerous way of getting yourself into a job that you don't like. If you want the biggest bucks out there, then fine, but be prepared to be a slave to that organization and work many hours, and potentially not necessarily feel like you're getting much of an impact, having much of an impact. So I think you've got to really value where you're coming in to this employment market, what you really want from it, the sort of type of company, the size of company. Do you want to be in a big company with that ability to move laterally with generally the better remuneration package? Do you want to go in a startup where you can put your hand on it and feel the heart moving, you know, heart beating underneath you, you know, where everything you do has an impact, but it's high risk, they may not get funding, you know, the whole thing may collapse, the remuneration package is probably just going to be basic, you know, or somewhere in the middle. You know, again, what industry do you want to work in? And as Belinda said, skills make a huge difference. If you go into a role where you're in a pinch point role at the moment as someone like a data scientist, the chances are you're going to be able to command more of a salary than someone going in a more standard, you know, bog standard type role where there's many people. For example, pen testing in the cyber world, it's been overwhelmed after COVID of people trying to get into hacking, and therefore it's oversubscribed with candidates, and the salaries have dropped because of that. So again, it's all about doing your research, understanding your market, networking your backsides off, and also, dare I say it, as a bit of a plug, everything from testing your elevator pitch to understanding the markets to getting your interview techniques, all of that stuff. Forced Employment Charity have those advisors who are there, literally cost you nothing other than your time to use for their expertise on those matters. So I certainly suggest reaching out, and those service leaders make use of your CTP advisors.
And James, I'm just picking up on a couple of questions that have come in. So Callum's asking about, I've networked and researched potential companies to a good level, but mentioned before, I'm finding that the roles are not there. And just besides submitting CVs to generic talent pools, is there any other advice on that front? I'm trying to leverage my network where I can. My first point on that would be, we're going into an election and there's a lot of economic uncertainty. So a lot of companies have put roles on hold at this point in time. The recruitment is cyclical, and whilst that might not be what you want to hear, I can reassure you that from September onwards, the job market will start to pick up again. So don't give up. But my suggestion on that front is also connect. If you can identify the talent acquisition person, or does that company have a military network? Because a lot of organizations do. is to connect with those two different groups to understand kind of where the hiring's at. You're totally legit to ask us those types of questions. Hope that helps. And James Doggett has asked, if messaging someone new on LinkedIn, is it best to open with an elevator pitch?
Yeah, so I've just replied to that, and I think I had a lot of success just from the elevator pitch. I think opening with conversation. What are you going to say to this individual? You know, it's always going to be more awkward opening with conversation than it would be just to go straight in for the kill with the elevator pitch. But remember, do your research, understand your audience. Therefore, you'll understand the tone in which you need to reply to that elevator pitch, because you don't want to go in that sort of standard army infantry corporal sort of, you know, direct way. Sometimes you might want to tone it down a little bit, soften it up. But again, focus on the conciseness, the skills. But what are you after from that conversation? You know, and your elevator pitch can be crafted in different ways. You know, so I would always go in and say, look, this is who I am. This is the sort of thing I'm looking for after X number of years doing ABC. I notice you're at, for argument's sake, I notice you're at Google. I'd be really interested to see if there's any opportunities where I would fit. I'd welcome a chat. Can I pass you my CV? That sort of thing. And I did that, and every single person who was a veteran got back to me, and there were over 250. In fact, LinkedIn blocked my account twice because they thought I was a recruiter not using premium, because I was targeting people using the search function. So the veteran community is honestly, it's the best thing for you to leverage, because you've got all these individuals in all these great careers. You know, just reach out to them. The worst thing they're going to say is, I haven't got the time. We had one guy who didn't get back to me. He got back to me 3 months later, and he said I was just out of country. Yeah, but he still got back to me. So, you know, that would be what I would suggest.
Fantastic. Thank you both so much. I mean, I think that there's been some really great messages there. I think what I really liked was, you know, what are the top 3 things that someone needs to know about you? You know, don't go in with the waffle, think about you know, what they need to know. And also the knowledge gaining thing. You know, the worst case scenario, you're always going to come away from a meeting with more knowledge. Even if that organization isn't hiring, you're still going to learn something, and I think that's really important. But above all, network. As you can see on the screen, we've got 2 more webinars in the series. The next one, this time next week, will be about identifying your USP. So we'll delve a little bit more into your elevator pitch, your CV, and that kind of thing. And then the final webinar will be around the importance of personal development and of gaining qualifications and attending courses. So we hope you've enjoyed it today. Thank you so much to Belinda and James. Absolutely fantastic. I'm sure we could have gone on for twice as long and gained enormous value, but lunchtime webinar does what it says on the tin. We've got to call it a day. But thank you so much for all your attendance today, everyone, and thanks to our speakers. Good luck.
Thanks. Take care.